Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the Exponential Success Coach. With me today, I have somebody who I thought was pretty inspiring and kind of exceptional. I read about him and decided this is a guy I want to have on the podcast. Most of you know that I've got a martial arts background along with a psych background. And, some of you who know me have said, wow, you're kind of badass. And it's like, I read Mark's bio and I'm like, not even close. Mark is Australian. He's got a special tie to the land, but he's also he's been in special forces. He's the equivalent in Australia. He's the equivalent to like the U.S. Rangers. Jumped out of airplanes, did some time in Iraq. I'm going to let him tell you all about that. These days, he's doing leadership development. And with that background and everything that he brings, I thought it'd be a great story to bring here to One Sharp Sword. So without saying much more, Mark Ashby, welcome to One Sharp Sword. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Juan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's talk about, you didn't just one day as a little boy go, hey, I think I want to, a lot of kids do. I want to be a ranger. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to, like, where did that come from? Because at some point the fantasy becomes the reality, but where did it all start for you? Let's wind back the clock a lot and talk about, like, how'd you get your start?
Yeah, look, I come from a different background to what you'd think for the military, I suppose. I grew up at the beach. I grew up in Sydney. Literally, I could ride my push bike to the beach. I grew up surfing. Probably started surfing with my father when I was around about 5 years of age. I was doing surfing competitions by the time I was around about probably 10, which I was heavily involved in. I was sponsored the whole deal. I was surfing with my mates before school, after school, every weekend up and down the whole east coast of Australia. Like I said, doing surfing contests right up until probably into my sort of, I suppose, mid-20s. And I was actually an electrician by trade back in the day. That was my trade, which it was okay, but I didn't really love it. But I'd always had a bit of a fascination with the military, especially the army and the specialist units in the army. And it was a bit of a quiet obsession there that no one really knew about. And then my father had a bit of a conversation with me one day because I was overseas surfing and not really going anywhere with it, to be honest. Never going to be probably good enough to be one of the top guys. So my father had that little gentle conversation with me. What are you doing with your life? And I told him, I said, look, I've always had this fascination with the military, with the army, and I'm going to give it a crack. I'm going to train up and I'm going to give it a go, which I think he probably thought, and most of my family and all my friends probably thought it was quite insane because most from my background there just didn't go to the military. It was quite rare. So off I went and joined up and got in, and then I managed to do quite well on my initial intake, which gave me a springboard straight into one of the specialist units. So I was able to go and try out for one of our airborne units and get into that unit on the first attempt. And that's where I ended up doing my career, a couple of tours of East Timor, operational tours, which I absolutely loved. And then I was given the opportunity years later when the whole Middle East thing took off, of course, after the tragic events of 9/11, and that changed all of our lives. And it was when the Iraq War started. I got the chance to go over there as a private contractor. And initially, my original plan was to go over there maybe for a year or two at the absolute most, and come back into the Australian Army, because we all thought it would peter out after a couple of years. And 11 years later, 1,600 missions I think we completed over there in total, which was, and if you want to put it sort of into sort of contents, it was, if you combine World War I and World War II, we did more time in Iraq combined than those two wars together. So it was a history-defining event. I was very lucky over there. I got to work alongside and for some amazing people. I was heavily attached to the US military over there, a couple of times attached to the 10th Group Green Berets over there, and a couple of very dangerous locations. which is an absolute joy. I even did a bit of time at the US Embassy over there. I was there for about 2 years and doing a little bit of advising with the State Department as well, and which I had an absolute ball doing. I think one of very few Australians with the State Department clearance ID. And I think it's all about the opportunities you get in life, and it's about making the most of them and not sort of really stuffing those opportunities up, if you want to be pretty candid about it. And just had a ball. Ended up doing my last 4 years at the Australian Embassy, looking after our ambassador there. And look, it's there's so much that went on into that process over there, and on operations and what we did. And you only ever hear about, I suppose, the negative things. You don't really hear about the positive things we did over there. And we did a lot of amazing things, a lot of incredible work, which I'm really proud of to this day.
I was going to ask you what you're most proud of.
Oh, without a doubt, the biggest thing I was proud of was getting all of my guys home safely. 100% that's the pressure as a team leader over there. You've got those souls underneath you every day, every mission. And of course, you've got your clients. I've looked after a lot of high-end US clients, generally sort of major sort of upwards. It's normally up that sort of colonel rank, but sometimes even higher up into that general sphere. And looking after them as well with a big responsibility of those people. Even had a few US civilian engineers that we looked after during the reconstruction of Iraq. So they weren't military orientated. They weren't like us. So I had a couple of elderly ladies over there that I looked after, US engineers. And we had one lady in general. I think she was about 70 years of age, still over there as an engineer working in Iraq in 2007 and 8 when it was so dangerous and unbelievable, like dead set. Most people would honestly probably last a week in that environment and go home crying. And she was incredible. And just to learn off different leaders over there, I looked after a US general over there for a while, a 2-star general. And I won't say his name, but he was an amazing man. I learned so much off him about professionalism and combining that with sort of empathy and responsibility, and just what I saw how he operated and how he was with his people and how they admired him, and always cool under pressure. And I took so many little lessons away from that. And so ended up coming home in end of 2015 back to Australia after many years away. And it was, it's a real odd existence because you're not really living in reality. You're away from your family and friends and just away from life. But it was really nice to come home and to spend some really quality time with my family. And that just started my journey. I went back into a university at 48 and did my master's degree, which was pretty terrifying. I think it was more terrifying than being in the Middle East. But I had the best experience and I absolutely loved it. And then that sort of all morphed into starting my own sort of leadership and crisis awareness and sort of culture, sort of consulting business, which I love.
What was your master's in?
It's in Counter Terrorism. Yeah. But
that's just a degree that anybody can get in Counter Terrorism. Yeah. It's like that's what?
So I absolutely loved that, and I sort of tried to majored in sort of cybersecurity and sort of intelligence and geopolitics as well on that. So I really tried to sort of broaden that whole experience there. It was a great time.
Didn't you feel like you could almost teach that by the time you got that degree?
Yeah, funny you say that. I was actually doing a bit of guest lecturing in my own master's degree, so that was quite funny. The biggest hurdle for me was relearning all the new, techniques at university. The new templates and everything's online now. Your libraries are online now. So I didn't have one book in my entire time there, and that was my hardest hurdle. So once that first semester was out of the way and I got the hang of it again at 48. Then I was fine. And of course, all the knowledge of what you've acquired over those years, you can't, I suppose, learn that, reading a book. You've got to learn that on the ground. Yes. And that's where I think I had that big edge there. But you have to be careful too, because you don't want to overstep the mark with the lecturers there. They've got to do their job. So I learned very quickly to sort of sit back and zip my mouth and just listen and sort of interject or have an opinion when I was asked. That's how I sort of rode my experience there. They got to know me quite well, and then when they were sort of maybe stumped on a point, I'd be brought in to sort of maybe clarify things and give my own opinion. So it was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you started your own biz, doing leadership development, how is it that you do your business? There are different types of of leadership coaches. Do you go into companies or do you work one-to-one? How do you do your thing? And what do you think your biggest messages are?
Yeah, I do both. I'd more than happy to go into a company, do one-on-one. I love working with their leaders themselves, from that sort of board level, that C-suite level, and up to the CEOs, because we all have our issues. It doesn't matter who you are. And I've worked with a couple of our country's leaders, and I've even done a little bit of time with one of your ex-leaders. And we've all got our issues. Doesn't matter who you are at that level, and it's quite interesting. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And I love going into an organisation as well if they've got problems with their teams, maybe with their staff, how I can work out what's going on there and use all those years of experience, what I learnt, like I said, working under that extreme pressure, trying to remain calm, because we all have those moments in the workplace, and really understanding where they're coming from. I find with a lot of leaders as well, a lot of them have maybe issues in their personal life, and that sort of comes to the surface. And it comes to the surface in the business. And it's once you can really understand where they're at, where their mind's at, you can really then help them out to really rediscover who they are in themselves. Because I think a lot of great leaders I've found, the ones with issues anyway, they really forget all about where they've come from. They forget what they are in the actual organisation. They're so high up in the sphere. They've been there for so many years doing it. They really forget where they've come from. And it's about reminding them, finding out the bit of passion again for what they do. So they go to work on a Monday morning and love their job again, as opposed to going to work Monday and just thinking about Friday afternoon, which is what you don't want.
Right. It sounds like you inject a bit of humanity back into them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was taught overseas by that general I got to work with quite a lot. He was like that. He was very, very big on just loving what you do every day and having that real inspiration. He really taught me that, not forgetting where you come from. He would speak to his private soldiers the exact same way as his own peers, and I thought that was really amazing. He'd just come around and have a cup of coffee with me in my accommodation in Iraq, and for a 2-star general to do that, it's quite rare. But he was so inspiring and just loved by his soldiers, and that's why I thought, wow, that's a person I want to be like. And I put a lot of those lessons and took a lot of those lessons into my own business. And if I can really make a difference in someone's life with the experience that I've had, to me, that's been a good day out, and that's my own message.
That's so great. It's amazing. So talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you teach. That's partly it's rehumanizing, and as a leader, remember who you are and just be more human, which in many ways means bringing more empathy, like seek to understand the other person. Yeah. What are some of the other things that you find as core lessons when you go from person to person or company to company?
I try and really help them, especially at that senior level, to remove the emotion process out of big decision making. So when they're making big decisions in the business, there to try and really remove emotion. And basically to help them become a more effective leader. You can have examples where I had a great example in an organisation where they had a senior, was a CFO that left the firm in not a good fashion, and he wasn't a popular individual there. And when I spoke to a couple of the other leaders there, other board members and senior managers, I was like, "What's your attitude towards this fellow leaving?" And they were like, "Oh, it's so great he's left. It's outstanding. It's the best thing ever." And I said, "So that's the positives. What are the now the negatives? What are the negative consequences with him leaving that organisation?" And they were a bit stumped. And I said, "Well, you've got a guy who's been here for like 15 years, so there's going to be a huge vacuum." And he was in charge of a lot of processes there with tenders and contracts and acquisitions. And I said, "So it's going to be a huge hole there because he took all of his contacts with him." And I said, "And also, who's coming back in to fill that void? Who's going to replace him? Is that person going to be worse?" And that's what I sort of say. Don't base your process to replace him on emotion, and maybe you really want to try and get the right person in there to actually replace that human being in that organisation, to get the best out of your own business. And that's what I try and really make them understand. In the Middle East, every single operation we went on, we looked at the positives and the negatives of every single mission. We removed it, and we come up with the best decision, because we couldn't afford to get our decisions wrong. If we made a mistake over there, maybe somebody lost their life, and we couldn't just go to work Monday morning, have a team leaders meeting, and just think, how do we do it better next time? For us, it was a huge consequence if we got it wrong. So that's some of the messages that I really teach them. And it's also just about, like I said again, remaining calm in those environments, because being stressed out is not going to change the decision. And it's super important. I go into a lot of those core things that we used overseas as well. A lot of those lessons learned, like individual brilliance and things like this. Really getting the best out of your people, understanding what they're good at, and really rewarding those people. Sometimes you'll find in organisations they're so quick to hire somebody from the outside, but maybe they've got some brilliant people that are actually inside that arena staring them in the face, and they don't understand who they've actually got in front of them. And I'll sometimes dive into that, and I'll have one-on-one meetings with a lot of their staff there, and it's amazing some of the people they've got there that are maybe doing a role they're not even exactly suited to, but they've got this incredible skills and abilities somewhere else that often gets overlooked. So it's an amazing arena, and I really love it, actually, to be honest.
I love that. I love the message of find the talent that's already in front of you. It's so often I look at organizations, and when I come in, it's very often I'll do interviews with some of the team members and be able to bring that as a kind of a several talking points back to leadership. And very often what I'll hear is, we aren't valued. Like, nobody knows the talent we have. Like, nobody taps us for who we are, what we can do. And it's very personal at that point, and it is very emotional. And so to take the emotion of the team members and sort of to make it's a balance to keep it emotional because it matters, and unemotional because it matters, right? It's this balance, right? It matters either way. It matters so that a logical decision can be made. It matters because the connection from leader to team member is not just one of directive, but one of true connection, is an emotional connection.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And you have to have that communication. Look, not everybody's born to be a great leader, and not every leader is born to be a great manager. And you've got to find out where your expertise lies. And I think you made a great point there, where you said when you talk to those team members, and I'm exactly the same. I love being that team in that environment. And I find that you get the more and more trust with them, the further you develop that relationship, and then you get a light bulb moment goes off where you've actually got their trust. Then they start to speak. And, at first they're always a little bit quiet, a bit standoffish, wondering if you're a bit of a spy in that organisation. But once they understand you're actually there to help them, then the conversations start, and then it's almost like the floodgates open then, and you really understand what's going on there. And sometimes I find the bigger the organisation, of course, the disconnect is just bigger and bigger, and it's like it's two all these different little environments in its own sort of sphere there, its own world, and a lot of them they just don't communicate, they don't talk at all, and you might have the leaders from above, and there's there's a disconnect from beneath, but it's like, but you've got to bring those people in, you've got to give them an opportunity to actually shine in your business, because without them, well, what do you have? You don't have a business.
Exactly.
They are the cogs on the wheel. You may organize, you may run that big wheel, but they're the cogs that keep it going, and you lose the
infrastructure, right? You could be the king, but if you've got no land and nobody running the land, it's like you're the king of nothing. So
yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting, Mark, because you would think that this is common sense. For leaders, please just make a connection with your team members, get to know them a little bit. And one of my mentors from years and years ago was fond of saying, common sense isn't always common practice. And sometimes it takes a consultant to come in and go, oh, just here's the bridge you need to build. So start here, have this communication, go find out about this person or this group. Because What you said was, when you talk with them, the more you talk with them, the more that you're likely to gain trust. And once you gain that trust, the floodgates open.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
it's incredible to watch as well. And I love when you get a really great result somewhere, and they really, really identify, after you've been there for a while, what the issue is. And, and the whole point is, like I said, you want and I say this to them, you want your workers to come to your organization, but they may not love what they do, but at least have them liking what they do. At least have them, and they want to then stick around. They don't want to leave. They're not looking at other options all the time. They're actually saying, this is where I want to be. I want to stay in this job for 10 years, 15 years. And they're the people you want. They're your core workers to stay there. And in this day and age, especially the young kids now, they're so happy to just move on very quickly. They're not like us back in the day, Wayne, when we were young and you wanted to hold on to your job no matter what. Now they leave in teams. They get together, They all talk about it, and they leave in sometimes 4 and 5. I've been seen as big as 10 leaving in one hit. They all get together. They'll go to a rival organisation together, and it's like, wow, that's just massive.
Yeah, or start their own.
Yeah,
right? Which is also good. It's okay, but obviously the goal is to get engagement. And it's not just for me, when I look at it, it's not just can they like what they do, but more can they believe in what they do. Right? It's purpose driven. It's about, can I wake up in the morning and know that I'm going to make a difference today? I'm going to make a difference in, even if I'm creating a very specific form or a very small widget or whatever, this thing that I'm creating makes a difference to somebody out there. And the question is who? And it's up to the leaders then to create that bridge and go, look, the work you're doing, it's disconnected. You can't see the end user, but you know what? That end user is this type of person and they're counting on you. And it's like, that's from where I sit with perspective of kind of the way the organizations that I've worked with work. That's the bridge that needs to be built. Yeah,
and you hit that great point about purpose. That's all we all want in our lives, is to have some sort of purpose. Right. And I overseas was like that. We had this purpose over there every day on mission, and to stay motivated in the same role every day over there on mission for like 11 years. You've got to have everything in order. It just doesn't work. Because you've got to have those your operators up and ready to go, whether you're doing a day mission or night missions, and they've got to be 100% focused and actually enjoying what they're doing. And we all loved what we did. We had this incredible teams, and we all loved, that role. And even though it was super dangerous and we all went through heartache over there, time and time again, we lost a lot of good people overseas. It was funny though, but we all loved what we did, and we had this, we saw the big picture of what we were doing. And it was, we all understood we were part of something over there and part of history. And I said this to say this to the boys over there: really embrace this and soak this up, because this is a one-off for us. This is it. This is the apex of what you will do in this operational, tactical combat sort of role. And I said it will never get better than this for us, honestly. So I said really enjoy it while you've got it. And it was
Were you a bit of an adrenaline junkie?
Oh, look, I've always been somebody, I suppose, that doesn't really have many fears. The only fear I really have, I don't like confined spaces, like inside. Maybe you get me inside like an elevator at a shopping centre. I don't really like elevators and a lot of people inside them. But if you want me to jump out of a plane, at 10,000, at night time out into the clouds, I'm more than happy to do that. I love it. And, I just don't really have that fear. And even in the job overseas, even in Iraq, how dangerous it was when the war was on, you soon get to a point where you really learn about the role. You learn about your own capabilities, your capabilities of your people around you. And you almost get to a stage where you start feeling a little bit invincible without being cocky and arrogant about it. But you've got to believe that you're better. You've got to believe that it's like being, I imagine, part of a really elite, like a football team, like an NFL team or the NBA or anything it is. And they go and they're believing they can win every single match. Yeah. And we had that same arena overseas, that same feeling. You're around these elite operators from all different walks of life, all coming together, and we all felt that we were better. And that's how we got through it and how we survived.
It's funny because a lot of the pro teams out there will liken themselves to the military. And you're going, well, we have to believe sort of like, we're pro ball players. It's like that's awesome. The commonality there is you got to believe you can win. You got to believe that you're in it for a good cause, that you're prepared, that you're ready, and that you can keep learning even while you're winning. And I think that's a huge lesson as well, is there's always more to learn. There's always a humanity to it, but there's also a sense of, I am so charged, I'm so ready. Let me do what I'm trained to do. Like this kind of base kind of growl.
And nobody wants to be a reserve. Nobody wants to be sitting on the bench. You all want to be playing. Yeah. And that was our attitude. You want to be over there amongst it. And you're right. And you've got to keep learning. You can never ever think you're the king of the hill. You can never think you're at the apex and nobody can actually reach where you are. And that's what I suppose the great champions in sport and a lot of the elite operators that I work with, they had that attitude. They just want to keep getting better. I mean, we trained every day over there. The guys were either always in the gym or we were doing tactical training. Even though we were on operations, we were still going every day. We're still, we're doing medical training. We were doing cannulation training, once a week, like proper live cannulating each other and that over there. And that's what we were doing. You had to do it to survive, because if something happened, you had to be able to jump into the moment's notice and switch on and switch into gear and get everybody home safely. And that's what it was all about. So yeah, it's very.
I think that's a huge. That in itself is a huge leadership lesson, and it's good for every one of us, no matter what role in what organization you play. If you're a solopreneur, if you're a machinist, if you're at the top of the ladder as the leader and owner. That yes, there's a state of readiness. Yes, there's a state of goodness, good enoughness, or greatness, and that you're training every day. You're not just taking it for granted. You are in it. You're training every day. You're sharpening what you have. You're getting sharper, and that's something that a lot of times people will either let go of or take for granted. It's like, well, just get busy doing the work. Well, part of the work is actually to learn. Part of the work is to train. Part of the work is to get better than just the work you were doing yesterday.
Yeah, that's it. It's a daily process, and as even like myself going back to university at 48 years of age, you're constantly learning. You're trying to get better in life before it gets too late, before you can't physically or mentally get any better. When that point arrives, you want to be always forging forward. And I know we're not all the same. Like I said before, we're not all built to really push ourselves to the limit. We're all a little bit different, but I think it's just about, as an individual, finding out what you're good at and really giving yourself the best opportunity to really thrive in any environment. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're building houses or you're in a sports team or you're in the military or whatever you want to do. But just trying to be the best version of yourself, I suppose.
Yep. Yeah, it's been called the zone of genius. What is your zone of genius? And then you gather other people around you that have different zones of genius. And now you've got a team where you are going to be on fire because you've got people who know certain things, and everybody knows a little something different, which is very powerful.
You are bigger than the life you are leading. It really is time to attend to that thing you've wanted to do or have, but you've been putting off. It's time to step into that dream you've parked for someday. It's time to claim true well-being, both personally and professionally, without giving up the success that got you here. It's time to check out Dr. Pernell's signature small group retreat, the Exponential Success Summit. Explore exponentialsuccesssummit.com. Seats are extremely limited, as this is a very special small group event. www.exponentialsuccesssummit.com.
It's interesting, Mark. I want to take you back to how you grew up. I had somebody on from Australia not that long ago. They were in the finance arena, and he was talking about surfing and how you sort of get used to pattern recognition. That, you get beaten up enough on a board that while you're sitting out waiting for the next wave, especially in Australia, where the waves are sort of a little bit bigger than we're used to out here in in the United States. And you're waiting for the waves, and you can start to predict them. And it's about pattern recognition. And then it's about going towards them so that they can carry you.
Mm.
And did you feel like that kind of experience served you as you entered the military and as you actually carried out some missions in Iraq?
Yeah, I think with the ocean, I mean, you're going to have two types of surfers. You're going to have your recreational surfers that just go down once a week, maybe, or maybe a couple of times a week. They start surfing maybe a bit later when they're in their sort of teenage years. Then you're going to have your people that start when they're young, when they're really young kids. And I can't even really remember learning to surf, to be honest. I was with my father. My father was he was, same as me. He was born in the water, so to speak. He was a great swimmer. We were always in the ocean together, me and my dad. So I learned a lot of tricks off him, little tips with the ocean, about how it all works with currents and rips and tides, and it becomes really second nature. It's like walking. For me, surfing is like walking. It's like riding a bike. It's actually becomes very easy, and especially when you're competing at a high level, you're competing against other good surfers. You're surfing with your friends that are good surfers every day. And yeah, it becomes really one with you as the ocean. And you really, where some people would totally fear the ocean, for us, you're at home, and the bigger the better. That's what you want. You want the big days. And then you want to go from surfing on sand to surfing over reef, and surfing overseas as well. Like we're very, very lucky in Australia to have amazing surf. But
Yes.
we've got Indonesia at a stone's throw from us as well. And that's another level again. So you're over there surfing the best waves on the planet. That are incredibly dangerous, but you become so good at it and so comfortable with it, and you're fit, and it's just an amazing experience, to be part of that. And yeah, I think that the advantage I had going into the military, maybe on other soldiers, I'd already had that mindset there of the physicality of it, of course, and just that real mindset of surfing, every day and the competing, and I think I went there thinking that I was maybe going to be one of the more unfit people there, because I wasn't doing much running and things like that. But I soon realised when I joined the army that I was fitter than most of the people around me, just from that natural core background, that upper body strength and pull-ups and push-ups and that sort of stuff. I found quite easy because it was years and years and years of conditioning.
Yes,
and there's something even to this day that I've just retained. It's like a muscle memory that I've retained. So it's but it definitely had a big impact, and like I said, learning from my father, who was a great man. And of course, with my dad's side, my dad's Indigenous on his side of the family. Mm. So and the actual our tribal people, they're called Guringai, and they're called saltwater people. So that's all. They all grew up on the ocean. That tribe as well. So, and that's a very big part of our background as well. So
it's so important to honor. It's like I grew up in Southern California, and the ocean was my friend. I never learned to surf. But wow, it always felt like the ocean was talking to me, like it's just, it's just there. And then, you grow up and you've got a tribal connection. And I just think that's so special. And it was, by the way, one of the first smiles I got out of you was talking about surfing. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Talk a little bit. We'll jump forward now to what you're doing in terms of coaching and consulting and that kind of stuff. You've got a masterclass out there that people can access. What else, when you do consulting, what should people know? What do you want to convey about kind of the work that you do? And, we've talked about some of the leadership lessons. What else is missing from our conversation?
Oh, look, I think that it's one of those funny things with I think people like myself with my background, people can be a bit hesitant sometimes. They're wondering what they're getting. They're getting some sort of person who's going to come in there and and bark orders at them. And I'm the total opposite. I'm not that person. I think in the specialist units, we're not like that. That's not accepted. Those sort of people just don't get in. Not many people get into these units. And I think if you're one of those sort of people, you're not going to fit. You've got to have the right attitude, the right personality. You've got to be a real fit, part of that mold. And I think I really bring that as well into business. And once they meet you and understand what sort of person you are, then it becomes, I think, a little bit infectious because you are different. You have a different attitude and a different mindset. And it's just something I think it's probably a bit of a skill I've got. I've learned over the years through working with many different types of people. And I think that real skill of mine is that I can really resonate with people. If I can't resonate with somebody, then I think that person's almost impossible to be able to crack. They're a tough shell. I've come across very, very few that I can't resonate with. And it's and I think that's where my skill lies. I'm busy doing other things. Like I said, I've got that masterclass on my website, and I'm doing starting to do a lot more talks now. I'm starting to do some online and actually in-person masterclasses for a couple of organisations in Australia, talking to execs, generally the exec level and above. Just with leadership and a bit of crisis awareness with their business, which I absolutely love that environment of talking to groups. And I'm writing for a magazine once a month now, which is like it's a magazine. It's called Industry Expert, and it's a magazine that's online and that's doing very, very well. And I was invited to come and do their leadership sort of writing part of the magazine through a lovely lady named Mary Henderson, invited me in, which I've absolutely loved doing that, to be honest. It was something I was a bit terrified about at first. People are going to like what I'm actually writing. But she gave me all that confidence to run with it, and she lets me have a real open leash with that. So that's which was great. And so I've got a lot going on. Sort of planning on doing a bit more, probably a few more talks this year as well with the business. Like I said, a bit more sort of keynote arena sort of thing, maybe some master classes as well. So it's going to be a busy time, which is always good. You want to be busy because we've had that period over the last few years with COVID where everything went south. Nobody was going into businesses, and I love nothing more than one-on-one or the at least even that, just that human to human interaction. For me, nothing beats going in there. That's where my skill lies, where I can go in there and I can talk to people live, and I can use all my years of experience to really find out who they are.
I'm with you on that. I'm totally get it. I'm with you on that. And the good that came out of the pandemic, I think the good that came out of it is that it allowed us to really reassess our values. What do we really care about? And then once we start returning to work, once we start returning to the workplace, how do we build those values back in so that it's not, there is no reluctance to go back into the workplace? Like the values of freedom, the values of flexibility. Who said 9 to 5 was the way to do it? That was a 1938 imposition.
Yeah, and now we've found that the whole hybrid working and remote working, and it's now a lot of places are now advertising online that they're like, we're happy to have you come into the office for 2 days and work 3 days at home, or even work at home almost permanently. So there's all different avenues now that we never even would have contemplated years ago. We would have laughed at that.
Right.
And now it's changed the scope or the landscape of that professional arena now forever.
Isn't that great? For those of us that are consulting, it's like, that's great. And for those running organizations, it's like, well, what do we do?
I know. and it is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? But I think it's a great thing. I guess gives people opportunity now.
Correct.
Maybe somebody doesn't want to get every day. Maybe they don't want to get up every single morning early and go and get the bus or the train to work and go into the city and slog it out. They'll be more productive maybe being in their home and being in the comfort of their own home where they can actually work better. So for some people, it's actually going to work better. It's going to be better for that business as well. And it's about the people that are in charge actually having that understanding, being a little bit more flexible. And the ones that actually that can adapt with it, those leaders, they're the ones that I think are going to prosper in the future. The ones that just have the old-fashioned attitude of, nope, this is how it's going to be, well, they're just going to go by the wayside eventually, aren't they?
Yes. Yes. Because if you don't adapt and evolve, you end up perishing. Talk a little bit about what people can expect if they, when they take your masterclass. This it's a free download, right? I mean, it's available. So, and I'm going to just say where to find it. It's at markashbyconsulting.com/masterclass. What can people expect when they go there?
Yeah, look, it's around about 12-minute masterclass, so it's not too long, and I just go over a lot of things that we've actually discussed today. A lot of it's over those important lessons that we learned about getting the best out of ourselves and the team around you, and understanding that when you're in a team environment, it's a collective, and that you've got these brilliant individuals in your team. And it's about empowering those people, about letting those people become the best version of themselves, and that really then is going to really help your business. In the long haul, when you've got those teams working effectively and that productivity. It's about that. I've got a little method in there. It's called the diamond methodology, and the diamond methodology is purely about removing that emotion, like I spoke about before, out of complex decision making. That allows our leaders to be more effective in what they do. It's allowing them to be a bit more clear-headed, to not be so stressed out, and to take one decision at a time. And I've worked under that environment. I've worked under that pressure environment that most people will never ever experience in their life, where the pressure to get it right every single time, and not just for yourself and the people around you, it's for the people you're out there on the ground with every day. And you've got to be that role model for those people as well to get them home safely. And sometimes I say to leaders, you've got nothing to worry about. You've got nothing to stress about. You really are. You're making this up in your own head, and you're compounding it, because no one's going to die tomorrow. No one's going to get blown up or shot tomorrow. And you've just got to work out a way that you can actually make that best decision to sort of keep progressing forward. And so it's a very easy, and I think what I love, Wayne, my favorite thing is that I do in the world is I love having something complex and then converting it into something simple. That's my skill, because we always assume, or people always assume, that because you can you're explaining anything to another human being, that they are going to understand it first time. But that's not always the case, and I've always found the simplest approach is the best approach. And I found that at a super high level. The higher I got working with these incredible leaders, the more simplistic they became, because they identified and they understood that you've got to get the message across the first time and make it stick the first time. And I was like, wow, this is so it's just getting rid of the complex and making it in layman's terms so that everybody gets it first time.
It's I've heard that as described as the definition of genius, right? Being able to take the complex and be able to make it simple so that it's received by all. It's so great. It's so great. What else were you hoping I would cover with you today? What could I have asked you? What would you like to share at this point? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's amazing. Every time you speak to somebody, especially when they find out about your background, because people they either love it or they maybe not love it, dislike it.
Yeah.
And I find out more often than not that people really want to dive into what you've done, the nitty gritty of what you've done in operations, and there's so many rabbit holes there. I mean, my first 2 years in Iraq, I was covert, so we were dressed like locals. We had big beards, wearing local Arab dress, and it was like being in a fancy dress party, but it was for real. It was real life every day. And I was in these sort of reconnaissance teams over there. We were actually making sure behind the scenes that the elections in Iraq, the first ever independent elections of Iraq in the history of that country, we were behind the scenes making sure those elections ran smoothly. So the US military, of course, they could not interfere with the elections over there. So they used us as a proxy. They used us to conduct all these meetings behind the scenes and ensure the safety of all the Iraqi election personnel. It was super dangerous. Al Qaeda at the time, they knew what we were doing, and they were out there hunting for us with these election officials trying to find us. And it was a game of cowboys and Indians, basically cops and robbers, but in the real world, the grown up world where the consequences of being caught were catastrophic for us. In pure layman's terms, it was off with your head. That's the reality, and we all knew that. And we weren't working in big teams there of 20 or 30 men. Sometimes we'd have 4 of us working together. There'd be 2 vehicles, 2 of us in each vehicle with a couple of local Iraqi lads that were fantastic guys that looked after us, our interpreters. And we were all working covert in these super dangerous cities. And it's a bit surreal now when I look back at it, what we were doing. And like I said, the consequences of getting it wrong. And I worked in a city called Bakuba, about 40 minutes out of Baghdad. And it was, anyone who's been to Iraq knows how dangerous Bakuba was. It was one of the most dangerous cities over there. And it was being at that level every day, of the apex level every day, to ensure your survivability. We all wanted to come home every afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to sit down there because this had never happened in history. You've never had, if you want to call it Western style contractors working for a foreign, military, and such a huge, blueprint with these elections to get it right. And so we were sort of writing our own history as we're going along. We were learning and adapting because there was no real blueprint for it. We'd have meetings with the US military over there. We'd have people from all different agencies and organizations. We'd have these big roundtable meetings there to discuss how we were going to make this successful. And they were like, so how are you guys going to do this? And we were like, don't you have any tips for us? And they were like, no, you guys are the experts. And we were like, we're not the experts. We're all learning here together. And this is 2004 when it was all kicking off. And so, but we learned as we went along each day. We were like, right, we did that wrong. So let's do this another way the next day. Let's not go out every day. Let's go out different times of the day, different days of the week. Let's change our dress, change the appearance of our vehicles, our registration plates, our tag plates, all these sort of things we had to do every day to ensure that survivability. And we became so good at it after that couple of years, because you have to become, brilliant at what you're doing in order to survive. So, but there are a lot of the rabbit holes that you can go down with what we did over there, and it just goes on forever because there was just, like I said, over 1,600 missions. It was just mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. So when's your book coming out? Because that would be a fascinating read.
Yeah. I've been asked a lot about a book. I've got a couple of organisations that want me to do a book.
Yeah,
and I think with us, and I'll say us guys, the girls didn't sort of come into that picture until a bit later on in the actual, the years later. So early on, it was just pure male and dominated environments, and a lot of the boys have done books, but the guys they're very judgmental in our own area, our own little world. So of course you want people outside of our world to like the book, but it's that inner circle. They're the ones that are your worst critics. So you've got to make sure you do it right. You've got to get it right.
What's really telling a story, I mean, it draws on your expertise. It's taking what's complex and not understood because it is covert. It is not something that is out there for everybody, and making it accessible. And that's incredible. Like that would be, you said something that would be a great title, the consequences of getting it wrong. It's like, wow, that would be an amazing title.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Really good, Mark. This is really good. Wow. Anything else that you'd like to share?
Look, it's just I work on a international scale, so I'm not just in Australia. Obviously, with everything these days being online, we can talk to somebody like they're next door to us. Whether in the States or in Europe or in Asia, doesn't matter where you are now.
Right.
And they can email me directly at mark@markashbyconsulting.com. Nice and easy to reach, and I'm more than happy and would love to have a conversation with anybody that wants to give me a call.
Awesome. I will have that in the show notes. So we've got markashbyconsulting.com/masterclass, and we've got mark@markashbyconsulting.com. So that's easy ways to get you. Very good. Thank you. I feel like, I keep asking, is there anything more? And honestly, I feel like I could keep asking you and just sort of like share a beer with you and ask you about, what about this? I just want to make sure that you've got, the leadership stuff out there, the masterclass stuff out there, and that the idea that you do consult and you consult internationally, you're available. So
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for being with me on One Sharp Sword. Mark Ashby, thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Wayne. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. My guest today, Mark Ashby, leadership expert, and wow, so much more. I'm Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the Exponential Success Coach. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you here again next time.